are now at lesson 8, right? Lesson 8 of the book of Esther. Welcome for staying together with us for so long. And we'll try and cover two chapters, two very short chapters, chapter 6 and chapter 7 today. We'll see how much we can push through. And at first, when I read these two chapters, I said, oh, it's very straightforward. Yeah. Pride comes before a fall, and the fall is very drastic, yeah, and very fast. Okay, it's not a slow, slow, slippery slope for Haman. Yeah, but I realized that there's a little bit more in the whole process as well. But let's see how we can push through, right? Esther, we know, is about the providence of God, the hiddenness of God, but the goodness of God in watching over his people. He never forgets his covenant, right? And he says that even though you have sinned against me and I've exiled you to foreign lands, but I'll preserve a remnant. And to be able to preserve a remnant and bring them back back into Israel again, back to Jerusalem, it means that he will watch over his people wherever they are scattered. And we see, of course, the threats against the Jews when they were exiled in Persia, right? And so Esther was the young lady who was raised for that moment by the Lord, positioned by God in order to save the Jews from annihilation. So that's the hiddenness and the provision of God, right? So we have actually covered the first two sections, which is the danger to God's people and the decision of God's servant. And today we'll start looking at the final section, which is the deliverance of God's people. And it starts with the defeat of their arch enemy, Haman, right? And that's going to be covered from these two chapters, the defeat of Haman. So the act so far is we see the danger to God's people, and then we see when Esther made the decision, right? Okay, it is out of the trial or the stress that they face because of the order had gone out to kill all the Jews, simply because Haman was dissatisfied with Mordecai's reluctance to bow to him, right? So, but then through the insistence of Mordecai and through the challenge of Mordecai, Esther made a decision to approach the king, right? And to approach the king, we know, without him summoning can be tantamount to death unless he extends his scepter and show favor. And we find that in the last study we had is Xerxes, the king, was delighted to have Esther, all right, in his presence. So extend his scepter, and as Esther touched the tip of the scepter, actually Xerxes asked, what is it that you want? For some reason, Xerxes was in a happy mood, right? I can imagine some of us, after a long day at work, right? We can come back, with the problems of the world, the weight of the world on our shoulders and on our head, and then we come back with a dark cloud over our head, and as the moment we step through the door, our wives would know it, and then our children would know it, right? But for some reason, Xerxes was in a happy mood, and he showed favor to Esther. But then later on we read about Haman as well. Esther says, if you have found favor with you, right? Please come to a banquet, right? And Haman was invited to the banquet together with the king. But when Haman left, we find that actually he left in high spirits. But when he saw one guy, that was Mordecai, he actually brought his whole day down as well. And so that's how we ended with the last lesson, Esther chapter 5. It says, when this Haman went back, he boasted about everything that he had. He boasted about his sons, he boasted about his wealth, his prestige, his favor with the queen. He says, I'm the only person that Queen Esther invited to accompany me, his exclusivity, right? That exclusive banquet. So he was happy, but he says, but all this gives me no satisfaction. Yeah, no satisfaction. It's almost like the Rolling Stones. Some of us are old enough to know the Rolling Stones song. I can't get no satisfaction as well. All right, and and it's as if that somebody, somebody use this illustration. You have got $86,400 in your bank account, right? And but somebody stole $300 of your 300 ringgit from you, and in a fit of rage, you threw away $86,400 just because somebody stole $300 from you. Yeah, we all have in 24 hours, we all have 86,400 minutes, right? But if somebody, but if somebody upsets us for 300 seconds, we all have 86,400 seconds in one day. If somebody upsets us for 300 seconds, yeah, that is 5 minutes. Are we going to throw out the whole 23 hours, what I call it, 55 minutes of happiness? Yeah, but that's what Hammond did, right? And he found no satisfaction because of one guy, in spite of all the things he had. And we realized that it was a heart problem, wasn't it? Yeah, his idol was basically prestige, right? He wanted prestige, he wanted recognition. He was full of pride. Yeah, we see his wife and his advisors. And they also shared that hard-heartedness. I can't imagine his children growing up in that environment, right? His sons. So he said, go and build this huge pole, and then you get the kings to go and give you the order to kill Mordecai, impale him on that pole, and then you go and enjoy the banquet dinner with the king and the queen later on, right? And so this is how it ended. This suggestion delighted Hammond, and he had the pole set up, right? So imagine you're Hammond, and now you go, you've got all this settled, you give instructions to the workers, okay, put up this pole, 75 feet pole, and then you go to sleep very, very happy, right? And you say, I better sleep early tonight because tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, I'm going to see the king, right? I'm going to get there before anybody else, yeah? So Hammond went to sleep, okay, just imagine, right? Went to sleep. But there's one person who could not sleep, and that's a story for Esther chapter 6. And who is that person? Is none other than the king himself, right? For some reason. Okay, so let's pick it up from Esther chapter 6, right? It says that night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles. The Chronicles are the memorable deeds, or the annals, or the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes, right? What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him. His attendants answered, right? So a few things really interesting. If you look at this, right? The king just simply could not sleep. There were no dreams. There were no reason that was given to him, right? They're given in the text for us to say why he did not sleep. King Nebuchadnezzar also cannot sleep, but he was troubled by a dream. We read that, for example, Claudius, all right? Claudia, the wife of Pontius Pilate, and I was troubled in the night, all right? Because of the crucifixion, all right, or the condemnation or the trial of Jesus, right? So, but here there was no record why he could not sleep. So, can you imagine what could have happened? Okay, and this is where your imagination takes flight a little bit, right? Could it be because he was just thinking about Esther? Why did Esther take the risk of approaching him? It could be such a serious matter, and she could have asked when he asked the question, "What is it that you want?" She could have answered it, right? But yet she did not. She says, "Come for a banquet." Maybe it's running through his mind. And when I asked again during the banquet, she yet did not answer. She says, "Come for another banquet." So what is this? Right? Could it be possible that was running through his mind? What will run through your mind sometimes when you cannot sleep, when your eyes, your head hits a pillow, but your eyes are wide awake. Sister Pat says she's thinking about her craft, e-kids craft. Okay. Sometimes I will be thinking about an area of problem to be resolved. If I can't solve a problem, my mind will be racing, right? So this is a situation. For some reason, on that night, and it just so happens to be on that night. Yeah, on that night, the king could not sleep. So whatever it was, right, it's a case of divine insomnia, right? Yeah, God has His hands on this. Whether you can sleep or not, even God is the one who is in control. So it happens that the king could not sleep. What else did it happen? It also happens that he chose the Chronicles to be read. What happens when you cannot sleep? Normally, you want to wake up. For us today, we will be, or we maybe want to watch a movie, but for most of us, we probably want to read something, right? Read a book, preferably the most dull book that you can read, and then so that you will fall asleep, right? And I can imagine trying to read the Chronicles, the history books, and not the most exciting thing, right? Or it could be because he wanted to be comforted, right? He's quite conceited as well, so he want to read all his previous exploits. It's possible, yeah. Of all the books that they have in the library, in the king's library, he chose the Chronicles to be read. Is it just a coincidence? And it just happens that when it was being read to him, the portion that was read was a portion of Mordecai's deeds, where Mordecai foiled an assassination attempt against the king, right? So it was recorded there in Esther chapter 2, verse 23, right? It says, all this was recorded in the book of Annals in the presence of the king. But for some reason, nothing else was done for Mordecai. In that time, there was no thank you, there was no appreciation, there was no reward for Mordecai. Maybe the king was distracted by something, maybe Haman just came in during that time, okay, active imagination, and then said that he just conquered or did a great deed, and the king was distracted. So Mordecai was never rewarded. But all this, it sets up the story. So the king was wondering, hey, we must do something, right? We must do something for this, for Mordecai. Yeah? And then what happens? Here is that. So he was looking around, okay, for who can he consult? Who can he consult to reward Mordecai? And Haman, being Haman, wanted to be in court early. We will read it in the next section. Is that Haman was around? Okay, so are all these coincidences? Albert Einstein, who's also trust in the Lord, and he says coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Yeah, and there's another a pastor who said this: when I pray, coincidences happen. When I don't, those coincidences don't. Okay. Yeah. I think as Christians, we know there are no such thing as coincidences, right? Yeah, it is God's divine hand upon everything He will arrange. People at the right place at the right time, for the right purpose, so that His will may be accomplished, right? So you see how God intervenes in simple mundane things like sleeping, waking, being on time, going for an appointment, picking the things that needs to be read from the chronicles, right? And what is chosen to be read and what is not, right? So we can see that life is not just random, but it is by the divine hand of God. So here you go. Esther chapter 6, verse 4. Let's continue. It says, so the king asked, who is in the court, right? The king does rely on his advisors, and Haman is his right-hand man, right? So the king and Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling. Now, Haman came, right, with an evil intent, right? Just because he was unhappy with Mordecai, he says, just because you're unhappy with somebody, it's no reason for you to execute someone, right? So, but then he wants to speak to the king to get a kill order, against Mordecai, about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. And his attendants answered, right? That's the king's attendants. Oh, Haman is standing in the court, right? Bring him in, the king ordered. And when Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Wow, okay. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. The king could have said, I want to honor Mordecai. What should be done for the man? But he left out the name. So it is left for Haman to fill in the blanks. And Haman, being Haman, right, was very self-centered, says, who else is there but me? Okay? That is his. Look at this guy, how the story comes to unfold, he's only thinking about me, I, and myself, right? So he thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? Now, being him, being want to be honored, all right, he pulls up all the stops, all right? He says, okay, let me have the highest honor. In essence, when you look at his request letter in a short while, you see that he wanted to be king. Yeah, he wanted to be king, right? And this is what he said, all right? So he was so full of himself in that way, right? So this is a perfect illustration of pride before the fall. Yeah, here this Haman had illusions of grandeur. For me, being a Star Wars fan, right, I still remember one quote from the Return of the Jedi when Han Solo came out of the cryo freezer, and he heard that the Luke Skywalker had become a Jedi Knight. He says, "What is these illusions of grandeur you're thinking about, right? What is these impossible things?" All right. So anyway, so here we go. It says, here he answers the king, for the man the king delights to honor, okay, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, right? And a horse the king has ridden, the one with a royal crest placed upon his head, on its head, right? And let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse throughout the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Wow. So imagine Haman was thinking about grandeur, him being paraded, through the streets and being honored, and then the king, it was not just himself talking about himself, but it is the king who's calling people's attention to himself. So that was going through Haman's mind. But okay. But what actually happened? This is where the story unfolds. Okay? Now, can you imagine Haman when he received this next statement? Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe, get the horse, do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. If you are Haman, how would you feel? How would you feel? You know, it's like suddenly having I think the heart would drop, the mouth would dry up, like you will probably like having sand in your mouth, cannot speak. Yeah, okay. You are being called to honor your worst enemy, right? Yet Haman had no choice but to do that. Okay, yet no choice but to do that. All right. Can you imagine if you are Haman, what would you be doing? As you lead around people, do you think you'll be shouting enthusiastically? This is what pointing to Mordecai. This is what the king says that this is the man the kings want to honor. I think he says, he will be very, very half-hearted. So we see Haman's distress, right? Pride comes before a fall, right? You won't be doing that proclaiming with much enthusiasm, okay? As Proverbs says, pride comes before destruction, a haughty spirit comes before a fall, right? And imagine the humiliation of honoring your sworn enemy, right? And shouting, trying to shout, but the words just cannot come out. This is what is done for the man the king delights upon. It should be me sitting on that horse, right? But there I have to, obey the king and point, give the honor to my enemy, right? And this is what's happening, right? It is depressing, yeah. His heart will be in distress, and worse comes to worse, right? After he had paraded the streets, walked the streets, then he went home. Okay? He went home, and this is his wife and his friends recognize the problem he has now. All right, and we'll read about it in a short while. But his wives and his friends, his advisors, were not exactly encouraging. In fact, they said, "You are done for." Okay, yeah, gone case already. Right? You cannot stand against Mordecai the Jew, right? You will surely come to ruin. Okay, all right. They are at one time they were telling him to kill Mordecai. Now they says, all right, Mordecai now has the upper hand. You have no hope. You might as well go, and enjoy your dinner. That probably may be your last. Yeah, that's it. Okay, goodbye, adios. Right. So this is what Haman is expressing. So Haman got his robe and a horse. He rode Mordecai, led him on a horseback and through the streets, proclaiming what just now. This is what is done for the man. The king delights in honor. Afterwards, Mordecai returned home. Mordecai returned to the king's gate, right? But Haman rushed home. Now, this is very interesting. If we pause here and look at the two characters, right? Mordecai, did not let the honor, even though he was paraded, he was given the king's robes and so on and so forth, right? He did not let the honor go to his head, right? That is his character. I mean, he says, okay, honor will not get the work done. He was at the king's gate. He was doing official business, right? He just went back and everything went back to normal again, right? So, appreciation and honor, should not puff us up, right? It can encourage us, yeah, but it should not puff us up. You will see also Mordecai did not use his newfound favor. He could have gone to the king, all right, and said, hey, now I'm in favor with you. Can I ask something? Right? He could have, all right, make an appointment with the king. Okay. Of course, he will not go into the king's presence uninvited. Yeah? He could have decided to do that and then really hantam, really hammer Haman, right? But he did not. He went back to his daily business of administrating things at the king's gate, right? And we read that he was always at the king's gate all the time, right? He was not begging there, by the way, right? He was official business. But Haman, look at him, right? He rushed home, he says, with his head covered in grief. You remember earlier when he sent out the edict that all the Jews would be killed, the Jews mourned. The Jews covered the head with ashes and they mourned. Right? Now you see that's reversal. Haman is now, the grieving is now upon Haman. Right? And he told his wife, Zeresh, and all the friends what had happened to him, and his advisors and wife said to him, right? Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. You will fall down, your downfall. And actually, in this particular way, you will find that the later on in chapter 7, he actually fell down, right? Okay, on Esther of all the places, right? So while they were still talking, he didn't even have time to breathe, in a sense, right? And then when they're still talking with him, the king's eunuchs come and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Imagine the state of his heart and mind, right? All flustered. Yeah, what he wanted to have great satisfaction to do so that he can gain satisfaction now sets him on the path of defeat. What are some things that we can learn from here? Number one is that we can find that God does not slumber nor sleep, right? He continues to watch over us. He continues to take care of our needs, yeah, in whatever situation. I remember I was studying comparative religions, and there was one religion that says that, you know, before you go to pray, and when you enter in the temple, you have to ring a bell, all right, or not, or hit a bell. That is to wake up their gods. Yeah, that is to wake up their gods. In case there's gods is sleeping, all right, or to catch your attention. But our God neither slumbers nor sleep, right? And this is important for us. This truth is important for us. In the sense that sometimes we wonder when things are not going right. We you know, when things are going south in a way, right? I know we wonder sometimes, is God there or not, right? Is God there? Is God keeping still interested in our affairs? Is God, you know, watching over us? This is the truth I believe that we can learn. Yeah, God watches over our affairs day and night, 24/7. He never sleeps. He never slumbers. Second is that he honors, right? He honors the righteous. Whoever pursues righteousness and love finds life, prosperity, and honor. Yeah, Proverbs 21, verse 21. And this is something that is important for us to also get encouragement. Sometimes people may not recognize, people may not appreciate, people may not even notice, or the things that we do, that you and I do as we walk with the Lord, as disciples of Christ. We want to do it to honor God, right? And in Malachi chapter 3, there was a group of people who said, why do we have to tithe? Why do we have to do all the right things? You look at the wicked, right? You look at the wicked, you know, they still thrive, they still prosper, yeah. So why should we go about all the hardship, all the spiritual discipline, you know, to try and honor God, right? And this is what Malachi chapter 3, 16 to 18 says. It says, the Lord listen. It says, then those who fear the Lord talk with each other. And there's another group that says, you know, they really feared God, you know, yeah. And the Lord listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who feared the Lord and honored his name. And the Lord Almighty said this, on the day when I act, they will be my treasured possession. I will spare them just as a father has compassion and spares his son who serves him. You will again see the distinction between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve God and those who do not. It's very, very tempting in troubled times to say, you know, I just take care of myself. I don't have to take care about God's business. All right. I don't have to think about or worry about or lose sleep about kingdom matters, God's kingdom matters. I don't have to let my neighbors, let my those who do not know Christ, just let them go their own way. I'm tired. Yeah, I've got enough worries of my own. Right? Why do I have to remain faithful? Why do I have to remain integrity? Keep my integrity. All right. Why do I make sure that I don't get involved in corruption and all those things? Remember, God honors the righteous. What is written in God's book of remembrance about us, about Piasau Baptist Church, about us as an individual, personally? If we can have a peek into that scroll of remembrance, what has God written about us? This is one lesson. And the third one, is simply this, and it's kind of the reverse of second point, is that God humbles the proud. Okay? God humbles the proud. Proverbs chapter 5, verse 21, 22 says, "Your ways are in full view of the Lord, and He examines all your path. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them. The cords of their sins hold them fast." Right? Okay. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Whoever rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. And Psalm 7 says this: whoever is pregnant with evil, right? Yeah, Haman is a very, very good example. Typically pregnant with evil, right? Even when he's lying down in his bed, he's thinking about how to do evil. Whoever is pregnant with evil conceives trouble and gives birth to disillusionment. Okay, whoever digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit they have made. The trouble they cause recoils on them. The violence comes down on their own heads. God indeed, as we learned in the book of James earlier, God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. So submit yourselves then to God. Draw near to Him and He will draw near to you. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Just 3 quick lessons from chapter 6. I'm sure that you will be able to find more lessons that's applicable for you. All right. And let me just wrap up in chapter 7 very quickly. As it says, Haman's downfall is very quick. Right? And a few things. This is just basically a bit of a running commentary in that way. Right? It says, so the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, again drinking, the king again asked, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to the kingdom, it will be granted." At this point, it has come to the point of decision already. Esther cannot delay anymore, right? Remember what we said, when the king asked her 2 times 3, and when he agrees to come to this second banquet, he is committed. He cannot turn back, and say, no, I withdraw back and say my offer to you, right? He's committed to Queen Esther's, to Esther's request already. But Esther's request is actually full of danger, right? And it takes for her courage to actually put up that request. Why is it so? It is because once she puts out her request, right, it's going to affect the king himself. It's not about a third party. It's going to affect their relationship. It's not going to affect the king's standing, the king's integrity, because of the edict. She is asking the king to roll back or to annul what he has commanded, even though it was through the devious plan of Haman. And what is it? says, then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, Your Majesty, and if it pleases you, okay, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. If I have found favor with you, if if it pleases you. Again, she makes that appeal, right? She's not demanding, but she's making this appeal. This appeal is dangerous because the king could be upset and the king could be embarrassed if she finds that this is a very command that he was instrumental. Now he was involved in approving that command. Okay? He could be embarrassed. Secondly, he could be angry. Or even Queen Esther, the queen, bringing up this matter for her. And if he's angry, heads are going to roll, right? And Esther's head may roll. Or the third way is he could just simply says, I'm displeased, right? And I'll dethrone you, like what he has done for Vashti. Now he could have also done that. And Esther could have said, never mind, okay? I just asked for what he has promised, half the kingdom. Maybe from that I could have control over all the resources, and maybe I can muster up an army and with all the resources, half the kingdom's resources. I could have done that, right? Okay, after all, it's within my rights, and the king was happy to get to me, and I could plot behind, right? She could have done that, but she did not. She trusted in the Lord, and she met that request and left the results to God, right? Okay, and this is what she says: for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. Now, if we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I've been kept quiet, but because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. Look at how skillful she is in presenting it. She presents it in the passive. Right? She didn't say, you king gave an order to kill my people, and that includes me, right? To destroy me. He says, for I and my people have been sold and destroyed. Now it gave the opening for the king to react to that, right? Because apparently, for him to issue a decree to commit the genocide, he didn't even think about it, right? But if Esther has found favor with him and has pleased him, and that king, that edict, that command is going to affect her, is going to affect him as well. That because that is causing some hurt to someone who's close to you. I mean, all of us would know, right? If somebody, if we as parents and if our children are hurt, or bullied, we would get upset, isn't it? Right? We want to extend a protection around it. If our spouse, have been hurt and things like that, we would also react, right? So this is the situation. Because as far as the king is concerned, life, life does not carry the value that we hold today, right? So, but then here he says, if we have been slaves, we will have no objection. She herself was sold as a slave, and then brought into the king's palace, and then became queen, in a sense that she is still a slave, right? She didn't become a queen out of, she didn't marry out of love, but she was in that distress. It will be status quo, right? Because of the genocide of her people, she put forward her case. And look at King Xerxes. It hit him, right? It impacted him. Verse 5, it says, King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who dared to do such a thing? And Esther said, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. And Haman knew his head was on the chopping block. And Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Again, you look at her response. She could have pointed to the king, says, it's your fault, right? You issued that edict, or you endorsed that edict, right? She did not. She says, there's an adversary, there's an enemy, and that enemy is this man, the real reason for that, right? So this is the situation. So the king got up in a rage. That was the king's reaction, right? Okay. He left his wine and went out into the palace garden. Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to back Queen Esther for his life. And just as the king returned from the palace garden, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. Why did the king get up to the garden? I don't think it's so much to cool down, although it will help him a lot, to step out to cool down. But I think he has to decide what is he going to do, right? As far as Haman is concerned, already, Haman knew in his heart that he is a gone case already. He's condemned, right? He's condemned because his edict had hurt, or has threatened Esther and also threatened the king. Remember, Haman, even in trying to get honor, he says, I want the king's robe, I want to sit on the king's horse. He aspired to be the person, to be the king, actually, right? And but Haman now, interestingly, turned around and pleaded for mercy from Queen Esther. How the situation has turned. Esther, we saw, it started with Esther pleading for the life of herself and for her people. And now Haman is pleading for his life from Esther. Things have changed. There is that reversal. And God is working in that reversal. Yeah. So when the king returned, he has to think of figure out, how can he redeem himself, right? How can he reverse this particular situation, right? The king returned from the palace and found a good reason. It says Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. Yeah? Now it's very important in the Persian culture, right? Ethics, right? In a court, no man apart from the eunuch can approach within 7 steps of the queen or the ladies of the harem, right? Okay, and Haman was, for some reason, when he was appealing, right, he fell, on the couch, and what happened was that the king, says, there you go, all right. Will he even molest the queen when she is with me in the house? In a sense that now Haman faces a similar false accusation that will lead to his death. Right? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. That means that the soldiers or the guards actually covered Haman's face and then arrested him. That's a way of interpreting it. Yeah. And finally, this is the last part. Then this is a bit of a interesting part. Harbona, right? One of the eunuchs attending the king says, hey, by the way, there's a pole reaching up to a height of 50 cubits, stands by Haman's house. Yeah. He had set it up for Mordecai, who actually spoke up to help the king. The king says, fantastic. Impale Haman on it, right? So they impale Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai, and the king's fury subsided. End story. Yeah, Haman was not the most liked person. I think he with his pride, I think he probably stepped on everybody's feet, right, including the servants. Now you can see there Harbona. If you imagine, he was rubbing his hands. Now is the time to get back to Haman, and get back against Haman. right? Okay, and he suggested it's by the way. Okay. So, okay, as I close, what is your reflection on this? Okay, I have no questions here. Like what Pat said, is it right to take revenge upon your enemy? Is it right, to allow false accusation to stand? Did God? So, so this is where I want to end with this, right? So you can see God's hands, when he turns things around, he made it very, very clear cut. Yeah. And he never abandons us. He is with us through it all. And we can trust him. Yeah. Right. So this is where I want to end. And maybe if you have some questions or reflections, I invite you to put it up on the chat or even send it to me. Then my next slide, I can incorporate some of your thoughts and your takeaways. Thank you very much.